Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Brian is working on getting connected. Sometimes technology can throw some challenges at us, so he's working on getting in here right now. But as we get ready for this, and as Brian kind of talks about future forecasts, the producer ag crop insurance team just wants to throw out a reminder, of as this wheat crop and a lot of our footprint is looking pretty good. And you guys are busy going through planting and getting ready for, corn and soybeans and milo. To get with the crop insurance specialist, visit with them, have some quotes loaded up. I know that team has worked quite a bit here lately on preparing some different quotes. Especially with a higher yielding wheat crop, hopefully, that we all have. So it's one of those things to keep in mind as we continue to go forward here. Hopefully, we continue to see some of these storms, that are coming through. Obviously, hopefully, we avoid the hail, but not always the case. So yeah, if you have questions, feel free to reach out to us at producer ag, and we'll gladly continue to share any of the insights. We work with three, for those that aren't aware, we work with three different insurance companies. So we have the opportunity to look at different rates. A lot of them, they tend to trend, but, in some areas it might be, pretty advantageous to work with a different insurance provider. So keep that in mind. And we have 2-hour binding. I often talk in meetings that that's not a great risk management strategy to make that decision 2 hours before, because sometimes they can pop up out of nowhere. But if it slips your mind or something like that, feel free to get a hold of us, and we can continue to work through that. Brian is still trying his best here as we get rolling. But I would encourage you guys too, as we do get this going on his end, to type questions into the question and answer portion there, and we can hey, here he comes. But yeah, type in questions. Brian and I can answer those towards the end of the meeting and kind of review that. But with that being said, I will bring Brian on screen and pass it over to him.
Sorry for the delay here. I really don't know what was going on, but you guys can see me okay?
Yep, we're good, and I covered for you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Let me get this started here so we can get going. This Teams is always interesting. Okay, bear with me here just a second while I get things set. All right, so we've got some good news today, obviously, with the recent rain that's been going on. So I want to start by sharing some of that stuff with you all right now. And I'm going to start by saying, for the past 30 days, and then we're going to kind of dial it in a little bit more near term. But if we look at what's going on for the past 30 days, you saw we were obviously having some troubles in certain places until here recently. But there are two most notable areas here, are up here to the north, also right here to the south and southwest, and then we've got another one way down here. Really everywhere in between those areas has actually been doing okay, and that obviously includes a large part of Kansas and the surrounding area. This is what has happened the past 7 days. So these areas up here that continue to get shut out, all right, and down here, but all of this has really been going to town in terms of moisture, and that includes obviously a large part of Kansas. Now, I know not everybody has received all the rain that they have wanted to out of this pattern. I get that. This was last updated yesterday morning, so the latest update on this comes in the afternoon, and I expect to see a little bit more widespread rain across even north central and northeast Kansas, but a lot of this far southwest corner continues to strike out right in this general area. And that does include that little sliver of southwest Kansas, and also up here into the far northwest corner for the past 7 days. And you kind of see these areas that I'm highlighting have had kind of a little bit of a dearth in terms of rainfall is concerned. We know how that's how that goes in terms of thunderstorms and whatnot. I'm just happy to see what we've seen over the past few days or so. And in fact, folks over in Scott County, I know picked up around 4 inches of rain out of that just a couple of days ago. So it's certainly been a whole lot better than what we've seen lately. And that includes all of southern Kansas and southeast Kansas, which was really going from bad to worse in a big hurry. So let's look what the next 2 weeks has in store for us. And you can see the next, well, let me back that up one. This will take us through from this morning through May 3rd. And this is the precipitation anomaly that's being forecast over that 7-day period. So this area here obviously is probably going to be the wettest. Up here to the north, it's going to start to dry out a little bit. And a large part of Nebraska has not been lucky at all in recent rainfall scenarios that have been coming through. So some of that dryness, I think, will bleed at least up here into the northern part of it. But certainly the farther south you go, where it's been the wettest, it's likely going to stay the wettest. In terms of temperature anomalies, again, I think will largely be above average in terms of temperatures. I don't really see any cold air coming into the picture at all, at least for this time of year. So we'll continue to go with that above average theme. This takes us from May 3rd through May 9th. And you see what's happening here. What I think is going to happen is we're going to get a little bit of a wave of low pressure that comes out from the southwest, and it's really going to suck some moisture back here to the west and northwest. So that's why this corridor of New Mexico through most of West Texas and South Texas is showing up as wetter than average. Some of that gets on up here into southwest Kansas, which would be great, but it doesn't benefit areas here in east Kansas and also eastern Oklahoma. Those areas, to be honest, could actually use a little bit of drying out within this pattern. But I think the farther west and southwest you go, at least from that period from May 3rd through May 9th, that's probably where you're going to set up with the better moisture. And unfortunately, Nebraska continues to strike out. And you might ask yourself, well, why do you care about that? Well, because it's in our region as far as moisture is concerned. If we have dry areas surrounding us, inevitably, that's going to cost us moisture in the long run. So it'd be a real help if we could get moisture going up here in Nebraska. But in terms of anything significant or widespread, it doesn't look like that's going to be the case. Temperature anomalies, warmest up here across Nebraska, eastern Colorado, most of Kansas, especially the western part, will see warmer than average conditions again from the 3rd through the 9th. And then this area down here, especially where it's being forecast to be wetter, would largely end up being colder than average, just simply because more clouds and soil will be wetter down there, and they could certainly use some help too. Let's look at the Pacific Ocean and see what it is doing right now. In terms of La Nina and El Nino, we are right here in between the two. Here'd be El Nino. Here's would be La Nina. We are right in neutral territory right there. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's all in good shape, though, in terms of sea surface temperature anomalies. And I talk about this all the time, every time we speak, that this area that I have encircled in black is really the most important driving force when we go forward into the summertime, because the longer these sea surface temperature anomalies stay colder than average, the more it puts out the signal in the atmosphere to inevitably bring heat and dryness into the middle part of the country. And if you remember the last month that we talked about, remember that little El Nino Costero thing that I was talking about right there off the west coast of South America? Look at what has happened. Look at the cooling that has taken place in that corridor right there, beating that back. And that doesn't do this area any favors in terms of warming up. So while we might not technically be in a La Nina right now by the standard, okay, I still don't like the fact that those sea surface temperature anomalies are colder than average out there. And that's why I think it's really important that we continue to capitalize on this pattern that we've been dealing with here recently, and at least through early parts of May, because I am concerned about what happens thereafter. And if we look at the 7-day change in terms of those sea surface temperatures, again, you've got a mix of warmer and colder up here across the North Pacific, but you do see this area in particular ending up being cooler than average. This little warming that's gone on right here won't really matter if this is cooling back here to the west. So in terms of the sea surface temperature anomalies, that's where we stand right now. In terms of the El Nino, La Nina neutral forecast probabilities over the next several months, all of these gray bars here are showing generally neutral conditions in terms of El Nino or La Nina right through the middle part of summertime. However, those La Nina probabilities, you see those blue bars start coming up here late summer into the fall. El Nino probabilities remain generally below 20%, basically suggesting we're not thinking that El Nino is going to make an appearance in 2025. Maybe sometime in 26, but certainly doesn't look likely for the remainder of 2025. So what we can do is look back through history and see what these sea surface temperature anomalies have looked like through history, grab some years, these analog years that I always talk about, and kind of put them to work here for you. So 2024 is the gray line right there. That kind of shows where we are. And we're kind of right in the middle of all of these different years right here, 96, 99, 08, 11, and 22. So we're right there as we head through spring. What does that mean going forward? Well, you see a pretty wide spread out here where those years ended up. So let's dial it into what we know in the near term. And with this particular set of analogs, I'm really only focusing on May to August. May through August, these are the precipitation anomalies that occurred during that time frame, averaged out of all those years. 96, 99, I threw in 01 and 06, 11, 17, 22. And you do see some things here that are a little bit concerning. And while we've been wetter than average here across Oklahoma and Texas, and even South Central and Southeast Kansas, you do see that May shows this area to be largely drier than average. That includes most of Kansas. Northwest Kansas, a little bit on the green side right there. But I think that's largely tied to this, which is the monsoon signal that comes up a little bit later in the summer. Some of that bleeds over into Northwest Kansas and maybe Southwest Nebraska. You also see some interesting things here. You see this corridor right here ends up being drier, really from Montana down through the northern plains and into the western part of the Corn Belt. There are some indications to suggest that an area of high pressure, okay, would develop somewhere here in the midsection of the country. And if that happens, you get that flow like this, which induces the monsoon. You also keep this corridor wet here, but in the midsection, it dries out and it also heats up. This is only true if those sea surface temperature anomalies out there that I just talked about stay cooler than average. If they, for whatever reason, decide to warm up, this whole signal relaxes a little bit. All right. But it is something that I've been concerned about and I remain concerned about because from a history standpoint, it's still there. In terms of the temperature, May to August, same deal. The heat shows up a little bit better down here in the southern plains, but we've got heat up here in Montana as well. But if we're drier than average in this area right here, okay, it will be warmer than average too in the long run. So this is something we're going to have to really monitor going forward. And the latest seasonal model updates, and again, these came out a couple of weeks ago. The latest updates will come out in a couple of weeks. But this is what the April update showed. This forecast for May showed drier than average. The tip to the forecast here, Nebraska, Kansas, down into Oklahoma. And that's pretty wild to think because Oklahoma and down here in North Texas has been so wet, but the European model shows them drying out. I'm interested to see if that is still the case when the May run comes in, just simply because we've put so much water in the ground here recently. It might beat back some of that dry signal. But in June, it's still there for most of Kansas here. In fact, all of Kansas is a slight tip toward drier than average. Down here in Oklahoma, West Texas, you see the monsoon signal coming up like this, earlier than average, which is right on schedule. When it's drier and hotter in the southwest part of the country, it induces the monsoon a little bit sooner. And you see the northern plains starting to dry out too, Montana into North Dakota. And that's kind of a harbinger for dryness to expand up here across the northern plains and kind of continue right down here to the midsection of the country. Now, again, the farther east you go, you're still wetter. And we're still dealing with this monsoon stuff here for July. All right. But I'm worried about what happens here in the midsection of the country. And you can see as we go into August, we are still pretty dry here in the midsection. Wetter farther east where it's been wetter, where they've been getting all that rain. But the interesting thing about this run of the models, and I'm not entirely sure that I agree with it, is it really shuts down the monsoon here in August for Mexico, Arizona, New Mexico, West Texas, all the way up here in eastern Colorado and western Kansas. And if that happens, that takes moisture out of the flow in general. and would only add insult to injury here across the western high plains, eastward into most of Kansas and Nebraska in those areas. So I'm not completely sure I agree with this, because historically, whenever we roll through the spring like what we've had, late winter and spring, the monsoon signal is usually pretty strong and lasts a little bit longer. So I'm not completely sold on that just yet. The NMME model for May paints the driest forecast here farther west across Nevada, Utah, western Colorado. Some mixed dry signals here in the midsection, but nothing crazy. For June, this is where we start to see it show up again for the reasons that I just mentioned. If those sea surface temperatures stay cooler than average out there, we'll start to see dryness set up there in the midsection. In July, you see where it continues right down here in the midsection of the country. Okay, Montana, the Dakotas, most of Nebraska, Kansas, into the western Corn Belt. And then for August, we still have that signal there as well. The April run of this, which is what you're looking at, was less dry than what the March run was, but it still had the same type of signals here in the midsection of the country. So if nothing else, we have to pay close attention to that. The IRI multi-model, May, June, July forecast hits the biggest dryness farther northwest, but also includes this corridor right here, okay, with dryness. Driest in the western part of Kansas and down here into Texas, all right? If we go to June, July, August, it weakens it a little bit, but we still have some dry signals here popping up in the midsection. If we go to July, August, September, you can see it's still there. So that's 3 different computer models along with history that are indicating potential trouble in the midsection of the country during the course of the summertime. Let's look at one more. This is August, September, October. And again, I know this is way out there, but it still shows some of that residual dryness there in the midsection of the country. Let's look at the Climate Prediction Center, what they have to say. This is May, June, July. They're looking at the same stuff. And you see a pretty stout dry signal here across the western high plains, eastward, across parts of Nebraska, pretty much all of Kansas, down in Oklahoma and North Texas. We go to June, July, August, that dryness really starts to focus across eastern Nebraska, northeast Kansas, northwest Missouri, western Iowa, that area here, but pretty much encompasses most of Kansas. The one thing that's interesting here is that's the monsoon signal starting to pop up from the south and southwest. So what that does is that weakens the dry signal here across most of the southwest, and that would include eventually eastern Colorado, western Kansas, west Texas, and you can see it kind of edging its way up here. That's where it is. That's the core of it. But you see, we kind of eliminate some of the drier stuff here, and we really focus it here in the Corn Belt, also up here in the northern plains where the dryness is. And that would be for July, August, September. So with that in mind, fire away with questions. The one question I do have going forward is exactly what those sea surface temperatures are going to do out there. That's something that's always a work in progress this time of year, because we're still undergoing the seasonal change that we have to deal with. And as we get, probably another month in, we're going to have a pretty good idea of what that's going to set up. But I already don't like the fact that Nebraska is dry. If it's dry and it's been missing out on some of these rains, and I know it is because I talked to a lot of folks up there, that inevitably won't be a good scenario in Kansas either, and in much of the midsection of the country. So if you're looking for just a simple tell early on and some things to worry about and look at, aside from just what I've showed you, what's going on in Nebraska should be a little bit concerning. Okay.
Brian, with these recent rains, and we talked about it, I think last month, you said if we can pull some moisture out of here, it might push all this back into summer. Are you still thinking that it'll kind of prolong it?
It doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt for us to shove as much water in the ground as we can, because if we've got moisture present, we can fuel thunderstorms on a daily basis to kind of beat some of that dryness back a little bit. So it's certainly a good thing, but I'm still concerned about what happens in that July, August timeframe, especially because if we're front loaded with moisture and we strike out in July and August, that ends up being a big wreck for the corn. So that's something that I'm concerned about still, even though we still have the nice benefit of getting the rain right now.
Yeah, and that last model that you looked at, I mean, western Kansas, eastern Colorado may stand a chance at some rains though through that time frame. A little higher
Yes, that
percentage anyway.
yeah, that would be tied to the monsoon, farther west. Usually in
Yeah.
eastern Nebraska, the eastern half of Kansas, we don't really think about monsoonal moisture too much. That usually gets shoved farther west. So if they're doing good things with the monsoon farther west, but we're striking out in eastern Nebraska, eastern Kansas, that corn crop is going to have problems with that scenario. So that's something that I'm really anxious to see what happens here in May, because when we get to May, we'll have the benefit of the models having seen the recent rains that we've had. And that data will go into the model forecast that's projecting forward. So I think that'll be a pretty good tell for what we can expect for this summer.
Good. Yeah. Well, next month will be exciting too. One of the questions that came in here said, "Do the models seem variable? Like, like we should expect volatility, or are the directional signals pretty consistent?"
Well, in the longer term, the directional signals are pretty consistent. I mean, that was not only the analog year set that I showed you, but the three different models that showed that there could be some potential trouble for the heart of summertime. The individual day-to-day model stuff, they're going to be volatile during thunderstorm season. That's just the way it is. For a lot of my clients now, I'm sending out 3 updates a day because it changes throughout the course of the day. From the previous day's rounds of thunderstorms, it kind of sets the table for what happens the next day or so. So it takes some constant monitoring. But if you're looking for longer range stuff, I would really like May to show some inconsistency with the modeling in painting a dry scenario for the midsection of the country this summer. Because if we can see some of that inconsistency, it means that they're locked onto some different things and not just this stupid dry signal that would be a problem for us.
I appreciate that. If there's additional questions, feel free to type those into the chat there. So as we go into the next few weeks throughout this, central part of Kansas, there's a lot of small chances, it looks like, but kind of consistent chances throughout the next couple weeks.
Yeah,
Staying pretty consistent.
Yeah, the pattern is gracing us here in a timely fashion, because this water's going a long ways into easing a lot of people's minds right now in terms of being able to have some, because we did have some good sub. It was just the top that was a problem. So now that we've got good top, we can actually tap into that, and we've got some time here. This is a really nice bridge to get us to when the next active pattern gets here. And I hope that that's the case. Even if we coast through May with maybe lesser rain than what we want, we're set up pretty good right now. I don't want to say everybody's set up good right now, because there are still some holes, all right, and I don't want to diminish that. But as a general region, we are in a whole lot better shape right now than what we were a month ago.
Yeah, definitely. Some of our friends towards the Sharon Springs area could use some rain out there. So hopefully they catch some here.
Yes.
Well, with that, Brian, no other questions have come in. Want to thank you and look forward to reviewing this again next month.
Sounds good, guys. Always let me know if you have any questions, please.
Will do. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.